So we're underway here today around the north end of Malcolm Island. It's pretty foggy today and there's not much visibility, but you can see a lot further than you think because the water is reflecting the fog and you can't see any division between it. But when you watch the birds fly, you can see them fly for quite a long way, which is pretty cool. But we're gonna see, once we poke our nose around the point here, what the rest of the strait looks like, and then make a decision on whether we're gonna do the 12-mile crossing and see if we can't make it to the Polkinghorn Islands or further abroad to Drury Inlet.
Our plan would be to head across Queen Charlotte Strait. We're hoping to meet up with a couple of friends in Drury Inlet. They're on a large fishing vessel called the Snow Queen, and they're doing some hunting there the next couple of days. I think they're hunting for deer. We probably won't be hunting, but it would be really awesome to meet up with them and sort of buddy boat in this remote inlet on BC coast. Hopefully this fog doesn't intensify. If it stays like this, we'll make it across the Queen Charlotte Strait today towards Drury Inlet. Looking forward to hopefully spending a few days on anchor, enjoying this moody PNW weather. We just installed a diesel heater so we can actually keep warm and dry on the boat, and that means we can extend our sailing season, so that's really exciting. Last year we basically moved off the boat in September because the nights were getting pretty cool and it was getting pretty damp, and although it's still feeling like that now, the heater will certainly help us so we can cruise a little bit longer.
So we figured when we're doing the crossing today in the fog, rather than looking at navionics and relying on the GPS constantly, we took a heading from the north end of Malcolm Island over to the Polkinghorn Islands, and it's 35 degrees, which is kind of like north-northeast. So we're just going to steer a course to 35 degrees, and we'll let you know in about an hour how close we get. These neoprene gloves are really keeping my fingers warm. I remember Dan from Sailing Uma saying that neoprene gloves up in the Arctic was what the fishermen used, and it was the best thing that he ever found to actually keep his hands warm and dry, and I concur. I completely agree. Neoprene is the way to go. That's our surf gear. Surf gloves and sail gloves. This is Pacific Northwest heavy weather gear. Also, I would like to make a point that this is the first time we've been out on the boat and you can't see land. I imagine this is what it feels like to be offshore, and I guess the closest thing I can really come to being offshore is just offshore in my mind with a lot of fog. But it's still pretty cool. Someday we will be offshore. One day. Probably next year.
There's a lot of colors, I don't know where to go. See a lot of colors, only feeling blue.
The systems on our small sailboat are pretty simple. We don't have an autopilot, refrigeration, a windlass, or navigation instruments. It's back to basics aboard Uinta, and we kind of like it that way. But navigating a ship in the fog feels a bit like driving blind. Regardless, there are things you can do to safely navigate a fog passage, like paying careful attention to your course, position, and your surroundings. Following a compass bearing while hand steering is a bit challenging, especially since we were slowly drifting east with the flooding tide of the Queen Charlotte Strait. To compensate for the current, we decided to keep a little bit north of 35 degrees. Our bearing led us right to the intended destination, an exciting little navigation win for two newbie navigators who have never been out of sight of land before. Well, it's beautiful here. I feel like it's extra gorgeous because of the low-lying clouds and the fog, and it's just so misty and mysterious. As we come into the passage from Queen Charlotte Strait, keep seeing new little islets, and they just keep poking out of the fog, and it's really awesome. I'm enjoying cruising this time of year. I mean, the warmth is nice in the summer, but I think the moody fall vibes are what I enjoy the most.
So we've just entered Wells Passage coming in from Queen Charlotte Strait. We're about 2 hours after the change to an ebb, and we've got a considerable amount of current running against us. We're doing 3.5 knots at full throttle. But we're just rounding the corner here. Dickinson Island is this island just over here to our right, and we're going to round the corner and go drop the hook in Deep Bay. Should be a nice little anchorage. We'll go check it out and see what we think about it.
In order to get to Drury Inlet, we need to pass through rapids. So we're thinking we're going to head to Deep Cove on Dickinson Island. And from there, it would be a great launching point to head up Drury Inlet through the rapids at slack tide tomorrow morning at around 10 a.m. Originally, we were going to do Pokinghorn Islands, which would be really, really beautiful. But Deep Cove makes the most sense for where we want to go tomorrow.
$150.
Good morning. It is beautiful in this anchorage this morning. Definitely feels like fall. It's super quiet. There are no other boats around. And there are lots of birds. The sun is trying to poke out this morning, so there's a little bit of blue sky, but the fog is definitely winning the battle so far, so we'll see what happens the rest of the day. I have a feeling it'll burn off, which would be really nice for our cruise today. The plan for this morning is to haul up anchor and make our way towards Stewart Narrows. It's about 6 miles to Stewart Narrows and then another 10 to Sutherland Bay.
Head down to Sutherland Bay, catch up with our friends on the Snow Queen, and see what a real fishing boat looks like. We're currently on an ebb tide turning to a flood, so even if we arrive a little bit after slack, we'll be going with the flood tide into the inlet. So we won't be trying to buck the current, at least, to go through, which should be a pretty fun and exhilarating ride if we arrive too late. We're going to pull up our crab trap, put Bruno on deck, and get going. Well, that's one way to catch a crab.
On top of the trap. He's a red rock.
He's a red rock.
And good size.
Yep. God, they're so strong. Buddy, let go.
Can't see where the ocean ends and the sky begins. So everything is just kind of suspended in this misty, gray, yellow haze. Just on the bow here, watching out for logs and other things that we might not be able to see. They're coming out of the fog pretty quickly here. Log to port. Like that.
We generally don't really like running around in a whole lot of fog like this, but when we do, we like to keep within the line of shore so that we can keep track of where we are and not just rely on GPS. So at the moment, we're just going to dart across the narrowest part of Wells Passage so that we're on the same shoreline that runs into the inlet, and that way we can just follow the shore all the way up until we enter into the Narrows. And we can keep track of where we are on the land, because it can be very disorientating when you're just driving around in the mist like this and you can't see anyone or people can't see you, and yeah, not the safest thing to do. So in order to make it as safe as possible, we're just going to do the shortest crossing possible and then keep to the shore heading further north. After days of fog, it feels really nice to finally see blue sky again. Arriving at Stewart Narrows, we quickly realised that we had mistimed the turn through slack, and the flooding current had already formed a fearsome overflow and a large turbulent whirlpool. We picked up speed, keeping in the centre of the deep channel as the current pushed us along into Drury Inlet.
Well, that was nerve-wracking, Captain.
Yeah, that was a little intense. There was a pretty big overfall there, actually, with a huge area of whirlpools behind it. So I would suggest hitting Stewart Narrows at slack. On our way out, we'll make sure that we hit Stewart Narrows at slack, probably turning to an ebb so that we're going with the current. There's an anchorage just off here, which I think would make the perfect staging point to exit. We'd come, anchor, wait for the exact time, and then duck through right on slack. I really don't want to hit that again with any significant amount of current going through it. We're only an hour after the turn or thereabouts, and she was already ripping pretty hard. We got up to almost 9 knots, which for a sailboat with a tiny little 14 horsepower inboard is pretty bloody quick. And we were swerving and rolling, and we almost went around in a circle for a little second. See there? Just grabs it again. Man, current is wild. It's also a full moon tonight, so tides and currents are a little extra.
Big tide energy.
It's got that big tide energy.
With Stewart Narrows behind us, we just had another 8 nautical miles to the head of Drury Inlet, where we had planned to meet up with our pals on the 70-foot commercial fishing vessel, the Snow Queen. We did a quick pit stop to check out Genis Bay, a remote float community halfway up the inlet, before continuing on our way towards Sutherland Bay.
Grandpa says everything that's good for you is red.
Join us next week for the wild ride that is living aboard this 70-foot fishing vessel, the closest thing we've come to experiencing the deadliest catch. We'll see you next Wednesday.